So this is the how the van looks this morning. We have a ton of partially finished projects. A lot of projects you can't finish until you push some other part of the project along to the next step. So I've determined that my biggest stumbling block is this back wall panel. It needs to be put in permanently before these panels can be put in permanently, or the toilet can be put in permanently. And it has to go in prior to the ceiling going in permanently. And none of those areas have been insulated yet either. So I've been working at the back here trying to finalize this ceiling panel, because we'd kind of like to stain all three panels at the same time to try to get some consistency of color. So I wanted to finish this ceiling rough-in panel. Of course, that meant I had to frame out the skylight, and then I had to make sure that I had support for my shelf unit. So I've got that stuff come in. So today I'm going to start by taking off all these clamps, taking down this whole shelf unit, finishing the ceiling rough-in so that I can take those panels down and take this wall panel down to get them painted. So that's how today's going to start. The ceiling, what we've done so far is around the skylight, I've built this plywood box, which is square, and then I've lined it with aluminum that follows the frame of the skylight, has this shaped corner. And I'm going to put the ceiling panel up, and then I'm going to use my router with a straight cutting, flush cutting bit. I'm going to follow this all the way around and hopefully get a nice look. So we'll try to take a picture or two of that when it's done. We built this shelf unit. These bags Gail made out of the same fabric that is lining the flare space. And so we just had them to check the sizes, location of these uprights. But this will just be an open shelf with these bags on it. We have we're going to put fabric panels up in here, and I've got a pattern for those, but I haven't cut those out yet. So that's another job that maybe we'll get to today, so that those can be covered in fabric. The other thing we're working on is up at the front here. Whoops, I'm a little close. This is going to be the shower toilet area, but we have this kind of unfinished transition between the front of the cab and the back. There's where this steel is exposed. I've already built a piece that that's going to be covered in fabric that fills this triangular area, and it goes down to this transition between the plastic and the headliner. And then I'll have another piece that will go down there, so I might get to that today as well. We'll see. I'll keep you informed. So this is the skylight build out that I've worked on. It's just a plywood box, and then we cut these strips of aluminum and put them up in between the plywood and the skylight frame, and we just kind of bent it around the corners here. It's been PL'd. When I PL'd the used PL adhesive to attach it to the underside of the van roof, I also PL'd this aluminum strip on here, so it's flush to this plywood. The ceiling is going to come up underneath that, and we'll actually see the edge of the plywood around here, and we'll clean that up as best we can. This shelf unit is going to be a fairly simple construction. There's a piece of 80/20 that runs along the top that is held in by some bolts going through to some riv nuts here and here. Then these uprights are connected, and this horizontal piece will also have a connection through this panel. At the back, it's just a piece of an L bracket, so you'll see just a a small sliver of aluminum along there, and the shelf is the same beadboard material as the ceiling, and will be treated the same way with the same stain, and it'll just it sits in the groove of the 80/20, and it'll sit on top of the L bracket. There'll be a few fasteners to keep it from rattling around a bit. There'll be an end cap here that will keep the storage from coming out the end. Of course, I've got to put the ceiling in place before I can permanently install any of that. This is just a filler piece, and the other joints will be covered with some sort of trim, but we haven't yet to be determined trim. This will give you a bit of an idea of what we're going for. This shadow line here will disappear because we're going to trim this back flush to the aluminum frame. This side is almost flush. There's not going to be trimming very much right there, but my rough cut was just a little close, but that's kind of the idea. So then the next step for me after I trim that will be to fill in this section of ceiling, which will actually end up mostly in that shelf unit. And then the wire, which is a system wire for the van, will be mounted in the corner and covered up with a little piece of trim. So I spared you the probably the most entertaining part of the video, which was me getting covered in sawdust when I used my router and my flesh cutting bit to trim this out. We'll have to, a little void in the plywood here we'll have to fill, but other than that, it actually came out pretty nice. So our next step is to fill in, get a little further back, fill in this piece of ceiling, and I haven't really shown you any of how I'm doing my ceiling because I really didn't know at the time. But we will show you a little bit more of how we mark out these bolt locations and hold the pieces up and do the scribing. So I've got a piece that wants to fit in here, and the toughest part is going to be scribing it to the back of the van here. So I'll do that first with a scrap piece of wood. All I've done is I've cut a piece that fits, there's a tongue and groove, a lap joint here actually. So from the lap over to the wall panel, I've cut a piece that fits in there, and I'll put the camera down and see if I can get you an angle to see how I scribe it. We decided fairly early on that we didn't want to bury any of the van's system wires and make them completely inaccessible. So this wire is going to be hidden behind a valance across here, but as such it'll be below the ceiling. It does have to pop up above the ceiling to go across because it goes inside the back of the van here. So I've just made a notch in my board that will allow for those wires to go up, and I just took I put my board up here when it was square at the end, moved it until it touched, and then just took a couple measurements. So I've just roughly cut a shape here. It's not what the final shape will be, and so I'm just putting this scrap board up, kind of wedging it against the wall panel and this lap joint, and I'm going to take a washer. I'll take my big washer and the pencil, and I just run the washer along the van. Oops, we've got a bit of a slope there. And that just gets me closer, and every time I just do it, I'll do it 2 or 3 times, get closer and closer. This is going to have a bevel cut on it because right now the board is hitting on the top, but I want it to look nice along the bottom, so I'll just... So each time we just hope to get closer to the final size. Oops. So I really did have good intentions of bringing you along for the all the details of how I put the panels up, but then I got carried away and realized that I hadn't been filming. But anyway, this is a couple hours later, and we've got that panel fitted and held up by the screws. So what's going to happen in the future is this wire will be pinned up and covered with a valance, and there'll be a piece put on the end here that will form the end of the shelf. But that's what this side is going to look like with the fridge panels in place, and the roof, and the skylight. So all these ceiling panels are ready to be taken back down and sanded up and stained.